We're back on the Nevcast with the continuation of last week's episode. Let's tune in.
Welcome to the Nevcast, where three bros talk business, art, justice, and the pursuit of Jesus.
Any day above ground is a good day.
Get ready to laugh, cry, and kiss 30 minutes goodbye with Peter Nevland,
Dave Nevland,
and
Rashid.
So as an African-American administrator and educator, I've had to be better in every way than my counterparts.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I consciously have had to temper my emotions at time in meetings where I've been disrespected. Another example of implicit bias, and this has happened to me countless times, is I'll be at a boardroom table and someone above me, the superintendent, for example, will ask a question and I will give an answer. And it was kind of dismissed. And then sometime later at the same meeting, at the same table, someone who looks different from me will say pretty much identically what I said, 15, 20 minutes earlier. And it's like an epiphany moment.
Sure.
Where people at the same table like, oh, Johnny, a fictitious name.
Yeah.
Johnny, that's amazing. And I'm sitting there like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, right.
I said the same thing
Yeah.
15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And so I've had to eat that.
But where do you go to
get?
but you got to, where do you go to express that feeling? Because that anger's real and the hurt's real.
Yes.
Yeah.
So where do you go to express the reality of that and then to be able to receive that comfort?
Yes.
Is there a place?
It's only the Lord. It's only by the grace of God. So Philippians 4 talks about don't be anxious for a thing, but to give everything to the Lord. Well, I live my life by that.
Right.
And so when I reach these moments of disappointment and setbacks, I realize it's nothing but a setup for an opportunity. And so I'm able to look at it as, you know what, Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good.
Right.
Now, God didn't say that everything's going to be good.
Right.
He said all things are going to work for your good.
Yeah.
And so I've learned that whatever doesn't kill me is going to only benefit me. It's going to make me stronger. My setbacks have made me a greater man, a greater Christian, a greater administrator. And so I just I believe you can learn something from everyone in every situation.
Yeah.
You can take the positive from a situation and say, oh, I want to duplicate that when I get to a certain level. Or you can look at a leader or a situation and say, you know what, that was painful.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that when I'm in a situation similar to this, I'm never going to do that.
Right.
And so I've lived my life by that. Yesterday, coming home from church, I feel like the Holy Spirit led me to Psalm 92. I think it's verse 12. And the word I got, again, not an audible voice, but the internal voice is, son, I've created you to be a palm, a date palm tree, a date palm tree.
Yeah.
Now, a date palm tree is interesting.
Yeah.
First of all, a palm tree is flexible.
Yes.
And so it survives in tropical storms, tropical winds. It bends, it gives, and then it bounces right back.
Yeah.
But a date palm tree is so specific because it is very fruitful.
Very fruitful.
It doesn't matter how bad the weather is or whether the tree is bent to the left or to the right, bent 65 degrees or standing upright. It's going to be fruitful in any condition, in any season. So I feel like that's what I'm called to be. I'm called to be that date palm tree.
That's amazing.
It decorates the
back.
temple, right? Didn't it decorate the temple too?
Yeah, palm
inside?
trees decorate the temple.
Yes, sir.
Gold palm trees.
Yes, sir.
Presents.
So
Well, and that's
on-
why that's probably why they chose those trees, is
Right,
because their fruitfulness
And they were there.
and also the flexibility as well.
Yeah.
And you know, the flexibility, it's not just the flexibility, it's actually their design. The design of the leaves is fundamentally different from something like an oak leaf. Whereas the leaf,
Less
it actually,
parachute-like.
yeah, it's less parachute-like. It lets the wind actually flow right over the leaves, so it doesn't grab onto the leaf like it does with an oak leaf. And so you get actually, because of the way that you've been designed, like the storms and the winds, they actually pass. You feel them, but they pass over you, and they don't yank at you like they yank at other people. And I'm not saying that, you know, because of who you are, you don't feel pain.
Oh, no.
What I'm saying is that the Lord made you so that the pain doesn't stop you
Yes.
like it might knock somebody else over.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Granville.
Plus being fruitful. I mean, that's,
Yes, sir.
Granville, are you? I was wondering earlier if you were making a distinction between your public school experiences and your private school experiences. Is there a distinction there, or is the same thing happening in both places?
Ooh, this is so rich. This could take an hour.
That's a good question
to break out. This is a great question.
How did you become such a good question asker, Dave? That was very good.
I have a really good younger brother question asker. I've learned from.
I don't know. I learned from my wife. I don't know who I learned. I must have learned from you. Learned from my wife. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, public school does some really good things. Public school does really good things with academics in particular. I love the fact that they use data and can use it well to find where the academic gaps are for each and every individual child and then remediate those gaps.
Okay, yeah.
So academically, public school has some advantages from what I've seen. But of course, public school further and further is driving an agenda that is anti-God,
really?
Anti-Bible.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so.
I think, do you have proof of that?
Do you have data on that?
In 2018,
oh my gosh.
I asked the Lord to release me from public education. At the time, he said, I have one more year for you. You still have some more people to touch. So 2019 was when I made the switch from public education to private education. Now, private Christian education is really strong in the moral and spiritual character development, I'd say, for students. But the schools, most of the schools, Christian schools I've been encountering, have been a little lagging on the academic side.
Okay.
And so the benefit of me being in both realms is that I think I can bring the best of both worlds. That it doesn't have to be either or, it can be and both.
Yeah.
And so my mission is to not only have the strong academics, but also have the strong character, spiritual development.
Yeah.
And it's not out of balance. It's going to be perfectly balanced in Jesus' name, complement one another.
Yeah, yeah.
They don't have to be mutually exclusive, nor should they be.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so there's that aspect. I was kind of wondering about your experience, like your experience and your
you mean
authority,
dealing with bias,
dealing with bias. If there's been if you've noticed a difference between private and public in that realm as well.
I have not, and that's one thing that's consistent in I think across the board. Implicit bias is dangerous because one doesn't realize they have a bias.
Right.
Explicit bias is out front.
Sure.
It's obvious. You can see it, you can read it, you can feel it, you can taste it.
Yeah.
But implicit bias typically only comes out when someone's squeezed. Either squeezed in a situation or by a question, and that's when you feel it come out.
Yeah.
And honestly speaking, I've seen it in both realms, the private Christian realm and the public realm.
Yeah.
I've seen it kind of universally.
Well, you know what it makes me think that that's an indication that it's a cultural issue and here's the sad reality of what the church has become in Western culture is that there's so much of, and I guess this probably actually happens in probably every culture, but there's so much of our culture that we just, swallow down, not realizing that we're swimming in that water, right? That maybe has nothing to do with the kingdom of God, and yet we just do it naturally. And, there's a lot of times that we miss actually God's leading for us to change that part of who we are and not to be separate from the culture, but to be wholly within our culture and wholly of the kingdom of heaven in our culture at the same time. I mean, that's not an easy thing because we're affected, emotionally all the time. But I just hearing that breaks my heart that, it's like hearing the statistics of divorce.
Right.
They're the same inside the church and outside the church. Right.
Actually, that got amended. It's not exactly true.
It's not exactly true.
It's not exactly true. I mean,
Really?
the statistic came out a few years ago, and it looked the same. But when you dove down into it, when you dove down into it, the divorce rate amongst people that actually were there, gather three times a week, 3 times a month or so or more.
Yeah.
divorce rate is way lower than the rest of the culture.
That's good to hear.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
No, there's some amendments to that,
Well, that's
to
good.
those statistics, that the divorce rate actually in solid church going people
Yeah.
is way lower.
Well, thank
But
God.
the first statistic that came out that we all reacted to a
Sure.
few years ago
Was exactly
made
the
it look
same.
the same.
Yeah, made it look the same.
But it's actually not true. So.
Okay.
And Dave, let me
Cool.
just give you a testimony for my wife and I. And I want to see that study. That's encouraging. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
But I will tell you that in Richmond, Virginia, the church where my wife and I married 26 years ago, it was a season of 7 weddings, 7 weekends in a row.
Wow.
And I'm talking about people who love the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm talking about sold out, devout Christians that were involved in the ministry and all that. Out of the 7 couples, only 2, my wife and I and one other couple, have survived over the course
Wow.
of 26 years.
Yeah.
And so that what you're saying about the data is very encouraging. But my personal story
Right,
of
anecdotal,
seeing
yeah.
it's less than 50% of the couples that I knew I
Right.
got married with. So it's
Yeah.
it's tough. Marriage is tough. With
Yeah.
or without the Lord,
Yeah.
it's tough. You know.
I mean,
Well,
my
we
wife and I saw a lot of young couples get in our church, like small group, that got divorced as well.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
have
saw it
we
too.
have friends. Yeah, right.
So when that data came, I was like, oh yeah, well that was our sin. We saw that too. Yeah.
Right, yes, sir.
But yeah, we should find it. But it hasn't been something that I've like made sure I know where it it
Yeah,
is. But I
right.
did hear
Sure.
specific, Anyways,
So-
that's encouraging.
So Granville, and by the way, I think with your name, what I've always noticed is that cool people make names cool. Have you ever noticed that? Yeah. It's like fashion trends. I remember this guy in high school. Everybody thought he was like the coolest guy in our class, and he'd wear all these like out of date clothes and everything like that. And because he was different, and he seemed to be okay with who he was while doing that, everybody thought, well, that's cool. And I remember thinking that, like, especially when I got to college, I was like, when I started writing, and I started writing all of these like, kind of goofy poems and whatever, and I'm writing the Flobgob, I'm writing Skrikawaka and whatever, all this kind of stuff. And I thought, well, if I embrace this and I'm happy with who I am in this, suddenly, people started saying, Peter, you're just so cool. And I'm like, you have no idea who you're saying that to, because I definitely have never been considered the cool one. Okay. If anything, I was the nerd. Dave's wearing glasses right now, but I was the one that had the ultra big glasses, and was incredibly scrawny, and whatever, all these things that I could point to that illustrate my nerddom. And yet, as far as you with your name, just your personality, you're so engaging. You're so warm. I know my son, he had you for just a little bit of time when it was always like, man, I love Mr. Jones. I want to say hi to Mr. Jones, right? Because he just appreciates you so much. And so I just say, whatever that curse that was spoken over the quality of your name is a lifeless curse. And say that thing is dead, and it has absolutely no hold over you, because who you are, the life of God in you, the Spirit of God in you, is going to make Granville. There's going to be more people named Granville as a result of who you are.
There you go.
Yes, sir.
There's going to be people who are naming their kids Granville because of the influence that you've had in their life.
Amen.
And their
right.
kids are
Come
going to
on.
go. They're going to go, oh, man, I'm so thankful, Mom and Dad, you gave me such a cool name.
Right. That's awesome. And in full transparency, our oldest son is named after me. He's Granville Irvin Jones IV, and he's engaged to be married later this year, and he's 25 now.
Does he go by Granville?
He goes by Granville.
Come on, man.
See?
At age 16, he came to us and he's like, I'm no longer known as Joshua.
Oh,
So God gave him the revelation years before I got the revelation.
Right.
And forevermore, he's known as Granville. And so he's Granville the Fourth. And so I told him, I said, son, once God blesses your union with a child, if it's a male, don't feel any pressure.
Nice, good.
Once you start getting to the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, it starts getting a little
weird, right?
So we'll see. We'll see how
Anybody
that
ever
goes.
get to like the 13th, Granville the 14th? That's like some serious tradition at that point.
it's true. It's true.
So
They
we'll see
exist.
about that.
I know a number 5.
You know a number 5.
You
Yes.
know a
Well,
number
right.
5.
I know him too.
Oh,
Yes, that's
okay.
right. He's been on this program.
Okay. All right.
This
Oh,
podcast.
he was the third. The one who was on the program was the third, but his grandson is the fifth.
Yes. Well, that's right. He's not. That's right. He's the third, but there's the fifth. Yeah.
But thank you for that word of encouragement.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
So tell us about, you were talking about the marriage of academics and as well moral, but not just moral. I mean, because you can always teach virtue.
Yeah.
You can always teach principles. What's different about your vision for you said Fruit of the Spirit Academy,
Yes, sir.
right? With both academics and on the spiritual side.
So this is interesting. This is going to be a unique school. It's a unique school for several reasons. One, it's going to be diverse. It's going to be diverse in not just the student population, but it's going to be diverse in the curriculum.
Now, wait, you're saying that here in Austin?
Yes, sir.
You know how
It's going to be a challenge.
not so
to be
diverse
diverse in
Austin is.
Yes.
Just
It's one of the
by
least
the nature
diverse
of
cities in the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I believe diversity comes by your offerings. So if you say you want to have a diverse student population, you need to have like some activities. You need to have some after-school programs.
Got you.
That makes it like attractive for someone from a different, ethnicity to want to be a part.
Yeah.
All right.
So culturally, FOSA, Fruit of the Spirit Academy, is going to be diverse in its curriculum and strategically going after ethnic groups that are underrepresented here in the Austin area.
And underserved.
Absolutely.
As a private school or as a charter school?
Private school.
Private school.
Private
Yeah.
Christian school, because I wanted to be unapologetically Christian and God-centered, Christ-centered.
Yeah, right. Can't do that as a charter school.
Cannot do that as a charter school. Some literature you might kind of allude to in charter schools.
Yeah.
You might allude to it having like some Christian principles, but you have to be very careful because you can lose funding.
Right.
behind that.
Yeah,
So I
right.
don't want to be in bed with that.
We want the parents to fund the school. Well, I mean, as much as possible.
Parents and donors.
Too bad the government doesn't just give the money to the parents to have the parents decide where to go. Yeah.
Although I did hear last week that the governor is considering probably
Governor
pushing-
Abbott?
Governor Abbott possibly pushing school vouchers.
Yeah.
Whether
Wow.
or not it happens or not, we'll see.
Man.
But
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
My wife graduated with a teaching degree, and and she taught in the public school sector, and then she taught at a private Christian school here in South Austin until we had our first kid, and then back then we talked about vouchers, and she was a little bit opposed to them because she said it doesn't matter. I mean, and then some of the teachers said, like, doesn't matter. The government is going to have their hands in it. And if they have their hands in it, they're going to dictate what we do. And they were like, no. And I'm like, well, wait, that can be written into the law. That can be written into the voucher system that it is totally, if you give the money to the parents, then the school decides what, they can, decides what to do. Anyways, there was doubt amongst her and her teachers that if the money comes from the government is going to dictate. Anyway.
Well, some of my mentors are
We'll
at
see.
a school called Oaks Academy in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's a classical Christian school, and that's a voucher state, Indiana.
Okay.
And
Of how many are those? How many states are voucher states?
I have to research it. I'm not sure. It's not
I mean,
many.
not
It's
many.
not many.
No.
Yeah.
It's like it's fewer than have a state fewer than don't have a state
Oh,
income tax,
absolutely.
probably,
Yeah,
right?
right.
I think
2 or
so.
3.
I think that's accurate.
Less than a handful.
I think that's
Right.
Okay.
And they are not bound by the voucher.
Come on.
How?
Interesting.
There's complete.
So it's been done.
How long has that been?
I'm not sure.
It hasn't. Probably not been very long.
It couldn't be very long, but Oaks Academy, if I'm not mistaken, is probably about 15 years old.
Okay.
So I venture to say that maybe, but I can't prove that
Yeah.
at this moment. But
Yeah.
But more than 10 years, I would say.
Wow, that's great. That's encouraging news.
That is.
Because my anecdotal evidence doesn't really support that.
I love it.
But Dave,
Okay,
wait.
keep going.
I've actually seen a different study, and the data that was originally put out is actually not totally true. There's a deeper data that has been researched out, and it shows that your anecdotal evidence is not true.
Well, and here's the link to that
just
study
wanna say-
right here. Here's the link to that study right here.
I love it.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
right. Yeah, that's right. It's right here. Right? Yeah, they're gonna put that on. I'm just kidding.
Okay, so Indianapolis. No,
we were at-
Indiana. You were talking about this school.
The Oaks.
Oaks
The Oaks
Academy.
Oaks
Keep going.
Academy.
The Oaks Academy is known right now in the private Christian education realm. It's kind of like the go-to school.
Wow.
And they are just an open book. They give you resources. They share with you freely. They're just awesome people there. But yeah, going back to the voucher, that's free and clear.
Wow.
You know,
Interesting.
The parents can hand the check to whatever school they choose. There's no strings that are attached to that.
Yeah.
So whether or not there's a voucher, so tell us more. We were talking about, we were getting into on the Fruit of the Spirit Academy, like
Yes.
your vision for that. You wanted
Yes,
to be
yes.
unapologetically Christian.
Yes,
But it's
yes.
more than just that. Because
It is.
there's differences between some people could say, well, I'm a Christian, right? And they believe certain things and don't get into other things. Like, what does that mean, unapologetically Christian, and how far does that go?
Yeah. So in my 2.5, 3 years in the private Christian realm, what I found is, honestly, I don't know anything other than being honest, open, and transparent. I call it HOT, the HOT
Yeah.
approach, right?
Yeah. Honest,
so,
open, and transparent.
go back and censor this if you need to edit. But what I have found is that during my 3 years in the private Christian realm, honestly, I found a spirit of religion that exists in a lot of private Christian schools. And what I mean by that is, and I hope this doesn't come across as being too negative, but it's teaching a form of godliness without teaching the power of God.
All right, there's so much going on with this episode. We can't finish it and fit it into this one episode, so we're going to complete it next week. Join us, Nevcast.